Aina on.
Niinpä. Okei. Haluatko saada sen vielä johonkin moodiin tonne?
Joo, mä voin heittää sen tonne. Noin.
Noniin, sulla on oikein efektejäkin siellä.
Joo.
Okei. Are we good to go, tech team? So, welcome again to the next lecture of the Games Now series here at Aalto University, tackling the hot topics of the games industry. And today we will be talking about virtual reality, which has been a hot topic and the next big thing that everybody's been waiting for I guess already 20 years. But now with some new recent developments, it seems like it's closer than ever to actually becoming something really big. And today we will have Samuli Jääskeläinen, who's a gameplay programmer at Mindfield Games, and he will be talking about their own projects and what's going on for them. So welcome and go for it.
Yeah, thank you.
Or you
Yeah, I should have this one.
Cool.
Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, so reality check, tackling virtual reality in games. Originally, Olli Sinerva was supposed to be here, but he couldn't come, so I'm replacing him. So a quick summary about the talk. I will briefly tell who I am and what this talk is all about. Then I'm going to dig into the current state of virtual reality, what we can currently do inside the virtual reality. Then practical applications, that where the VR is used and where you can use it in the future. Then I'm going to tackle the designs for VR. How can you make your own virtual reality experience and what you should take in mind, taking care of when you're making the experience. And then I'm going to talk briefly about practical VR development inside Unity and actually giving you real tips about real development because I'm a programmer. And here, after the talk, I will be staying here for questions. So if you have any questions regarding about virtual reality or the development or any technical stuff, just shoot me. So, who I am. I'm Samuli Jääskeläinen, and I'm currently working as a gameplay programmer in Mindfield Games. And when I'm not doing games at Mindfield Games, I'm doing a Twitter challenge called One Game a Month, where I'm doing a one game a month, and I've been doing that for 2 years, successfully, without missing a month. I come originally from Kajaani Ammattikorkeakoulu University of Applied Sciences, where I was a student, and I'm still a student. I'm waiting for graduation. And I was a lecturer at Kainuun Ammattiopisto, lecturing Unity for the high school students. And then before joining Mindfield Games, I was doing virtual reality research and development for F-Secure, but I can't talk about that. Okay, so this is the dream. This is what everyone wants. You want to check up yourself into the another reality, another dimension, to get all of your senses and forget this miserable September. But this is not what I'm going to talk about. This is the future. I'm going to talk about present. What are the current technologies that are trying to lead into this thing? But I can't promise you that you can make anything like in sci-fi with this technology. But it's still pretty damn cool, even though you can't connect them physically with all of your senses. Okay, so the current state of virtual reality. We've gone quite far from the early ages. That's from, I think it's from 80s or 90s, something like that. They are still, I think, functional units of that virtualizer in UK. So it's still being used, even though it's super old. So this was virtual reality gaming for the consumers, like 20 years ago. And I'm going to talk and focus on the consumer virtual reality. We've had big leaps in the army and places like that, but not for the consumers. But finally, we got Oculus Rift, and I'm going to give a brief history of what happened to Oculus and how it formed, which is now the current state-of-the-art virtual reality headset, so-called HMD, head-mounted display. How many of you have used Oculus Rift? How many of you have used the newer DK2 version? Okay. It's really a different experience this time, and it's getting better all the time. So, why do we have now this revolution of head-mounted displays? The screen display technology has been rapidly getting better and better and better. So nowadays, we have really, really high-resolution displays with really high pixel density. And because of that, there's been a lot of studies about virtual reality. This is from Valve. Before Oculus, they were doing their own virtual reality research with 2 phones attached to the head and these all kind of markers around the room to track your position. And then, of course, there were hackers on the little forums in the dark side of the internet doing their own little thing. This is the first iteration of Oculus Rift. It's really, really, really garage quality. But it was a proof of concept, and Palmer Luckey was able to found a company called Oculus and raise over $2 million on the Kickstarter. Then the VR really got into all the news and everywhere. And then Oculus was bought by Facebook. And because of this, all the funds, they've been acquiring a lot of brilliant minds from the industry. And the newest partnership from Oculus was with Samsung, which is Gear VR, which is a mobile Oculus. So you can put your Note phone into this headset, and it's actually quite comfortable. So different HMDs that are currently now in development or market that you can actually access somehow is the Oculus Rift Development Kit 2, which is for the developers from the Oculus, and they are going to release a consumer version sometime. They haven't announced anything, and they haven't even said that there won't be any more developer versions in between, but let's hope the next one is the consumer version. Then Sony is another big company doing a lot of VR stuff. This is Sony's Project Morpheus. This is the older model. I couldn't find a good picture of a newer model, and it's currently being given to first-party developers of Sony, so indies can't get access to it yet, but let's hope they will open up their doors soon. Then we have the Gear VR, which is the mobile side of things, and it's currently state-of-the-art mobile device, which is launching before the end of the year. And of course, Google did their own little thing called Google Cardboard, which is just print out a cardboard, put your whatever mobile Android phone you want, put it on your head, and that's VR. And what I really, really, really love about cardboard is that it lowers your expectations, because it's just a piece of cardboard and a phone. It's a very crappy experience, but you can get the same kind of feeling that you would get from the Oculus Rift Development Kit 1, that there is promise about this technology, but it's not really yet ready for consumers. So what this Gear VR is doing differently on mobile side is that it's not actually using the phone's accelerator. They have integrated their own accelerators into the headset, so it can match the head position way better. Because with Gear VR, because with Cardboard, it's using the accelerators from the phone, which are really, really crappy to give accurate head position, if you have ever used them. Okay, so now let's talk where is our visuals currently at the state. So what kind of screens we have and why current screens have enabled us to do virtual reality. So this is a picture of like pixel density, which is getting better on mobile screens. So you can see the Development Kit 1 Oculus Rift resolution there at first, and then the Gear VR is in the middle. And what we are hoping and aiming for is the third one, And even that's not enough, but that should be within few years reachable. I'm pretty sure that Oculus Rift, when they are launching a consumer version, it won't have that high pixel density, but it's getting there all the time. And even with the picture on the middle, it's enough to convey really good sense of presence of you being in another place. Then the lenses are really important part. It's actually one of the most important parts of the device because they provide you the higher field of view and they can give you more information for your eyes from that little screen. But the problem with that is the image is distorted. So on the programmer side, you always need to distort the image. So if you have seen any pictures from Oculus Rift games, that's why they have this so-called parallel distortion in the rendering. And optics are also getting better and better. So for example, the newest Oculus Rift prototype doesn't even have spherical lenses, they're actually square. Because the displays are square as well. Okay, and then there is this fancy word called low persistence, which radically diffuses motion blur. So with older virtual reality headsets, you have the problem of when you are moving the head, the whole world gets blurry. And if you are moving your head in the real life, it doesn't get that blurry. So with low persistence displays, you were able to do this kind of stuff that you can now actually see a clear image all the time. That's one of the biggest differences between Oculus Rift Development Kit 1 and 2. And then, because of the lenses, we get this higher field of view, and it's getting higher and higher. But next big step would be curved screens, which we don't really have yet on the consumer level. But even in current state, the field of view is really wide. It's more than 100 degrees in most of the head-mounted displays in the market. But this is giving us one problem that you can see on the other image, which is taken from Unity, where you need to actually render more of the scene. So most of the time, you are rendering more stuff that you would be rendering in the normal game. So it's really important to maintain high FPS when you are making a virtual reality game. And you need to maintain it stably. With Oculus Rift Development Kit 2, you need to maintain at least 75 FPS all the time and not go under that. If you drop any frames under that, it will really reduce the effectiveness of the experience. And with Oculus Rift Development Kit, Oculus Rift's consumer level headset they are working on, they've said that it's going to be around 90 Hertz, so you need to be able to output 90 frames per second. So for the first time for many years, you actually need to think about optimizations, because with current state of like computers, you can just push polish well how much if you want. Like, it doesn't really matter that much, but now you need to consider actually what you are doing with the computers. So fortunately, there's been a lot of ways to fight these monstrous system specs, so you don't need to buy these amazing computers that cost a lot of money to render these. So one of the biggest ones is called time warp, which I'm not going to talk in detail, but you should Google it if you are making virtual reality games. And that's basically giving you free pass for some of the dropped frames. So if you have like a really big explosion and it might drop 1 or 2 frames, the time warp actually takes the previous rendered frames and thinks like, okay, I can construct these as a other image 2 inches that way. So they are creating 3D data from the previous frames. It's kind of like magic if you try to like explain it, but once you get to the technical details, it actually makes sense. Then another way of fighting the FPS is just rendering target size. So you don't actually need to render a full-size image all the time. So if you have some places of the game that are heavier, you can render a smaller amount and then just upscale it onto the headset, which works quite okay at some cases. And of course, you can do it other way around too. So you can just get the really big image and scale it down if you don't have any performance problems. And what's the best thing about this is it can be adjustable through options for the players. So the players who have a crappy computers, they can still get the stable frame rates. And then there is this on the bottom. We got this one picture. It's from the NVIDIA. They are going to optimize their drivers for VR and giving low access to the hardware for the Oculus. So you can get really, really good performance in the future. For example, a different rendering card, different GPU for each eye would be one of the best solutions. Because with current technology where you have multiple GPUs, it's rendering half of the image and then half of the image. So it's not going to work with VR currently. Okay, so we have eyes now in our virtual reality. But we have all these other senses. And I want to talk about input, how we can grab stuff, get into the another place. So one of the most logical things would be just track your hands. Kinect is doing it. This picture is from Leap Motion, which is kind of mini Kinect. It works very well when it's working, but the worst case scenarios of it getting stuff wrong are so bad that it's getting unusable at those points. But that's something to be considering when you are doing a VR, what kind of input would you want to do. This is one of the most popular input methods currently outside of traditional input methods. Then there is this company called SixSense, which originally made Razer Hydra, which is the green one here, and it was a flop because there was no applications for it. Then they ceased to manufacture it. Then Oculus came, and everyone wanted it because it was the perfect solution for VR input. So now they are making this STEM, which is the better version of Razer Hydra, but it's not out yet, but it will be out soon. And it's really interesting to see if this will be the one that is being mostly used, because currently the Razer Hydra is very, very, very used among developers, but it's really hard to get them because you need to buy them used and they cost like $400 or $500 because there is so few of them. Then Sony has their own solution already for the Morpheus, which is PlayStation Move. And that's actually the best purpose for PlayStation Move currently. It works really, really, really well from what I've heard from the demos that Sony has been using. And many people actually been saying that Sony's demos for the virtual reality are a lot better than Oculus, just because they have better input. They have already figured it out a little bit, because they've been tinkering with the virtual reality input solutions quite a lot. Oculus haven't announced anything about their own controllers, if they are going to make them, but it's very likely that at some point Oculus will also give some kind of controller for the Rift. Then there are these glove solutions. This is Control VR, which is kind of like tracking your hands, but this works better because it doesn't have any cameras. But the downside is it's way more expensive. So the Leap Motion is $100, just a little camera. This thing costs a few $100s. I don't remember what's the exact sum. I think it's $500 or $600. So of course it's precise, it's cool, but it's not consumer prices. And then there is the next step of this rigging yourself. This is the full body motion capture system that you can buy around you, which is Perception Neuron. It's used already on movie industry, but they are now giving it for the game industry too, so you could actually rig your whole body up and put it into virtual reality. It's kind of cool, but it's also quite expensive to buy a lot of these little sensors. But it's not like super expensive because this is still like under 100 grand. So traditionally these kind of systems were like a couple of $1,000. And then, if you want to walk around, you need some kind of device for your foot. So this is one of the first omnidirectional treadmills called Virtuix Omni, where you just have this little walk pan where you walk around. And this is also still like in development. They are releasing their product at the first quarter of next year, and then we'll actually see how well this thing works. But what I've heard, it's kind of fun, but noisy, because you need to have these special shoes that are making noise with the friction and everything. And then you are really, really strapped, so you can only stand in this solution. Then there is another closer solution for Germany, which is Cyberit Virtualizer, which is the same kind of thing, but it has these springs and stuff, so you can actually jump around and crouch and sit around. And this is, of course, it sounds, okay, this is a lot nicer, but it's also a lot more expensive, of course. And because it has more moving parts, I think it's more prone to break down. But this is just the first generation of this kind of controllers, so we'll see what's in the mind of consumers in the future. So these kind of things might not be good for the average gamer or average player, but if you have like an architectural firm where you want to put your clients to walk inside the buildings that they are going to live in, these kind of solutions would work fine with them. And of course, you might see like a resurrection of arcades, which would be nice. So we've now given input for the game. What about getting output from the game for us? Because we get the visual feedback, but what about these other senses? So this is called Buttkicker. You can strap it into your chair, and it takes your buzz noise from the sound, and it actually vibrates the whole chair. And people have said it's really good for the simulator games where you are sitting down. So for example, if you are driving a Formula car or something, and you can like still getting rumble from the steering wheel, but you are also getting rumble from your back, just like you would be driving a car. And then there is a normal rumble mechanics, like if you are making a game with traditional controller, you can have rumble on that. That's a basic little haptic feedback, so-called. And then a lot of these very special controllers, for example, gun controllers, have also their little impacts for your body. And the most interesting thing is scent. So how can you get different smells into the games? And once you have these kind of metaverse, futuristic places where you can actually walk around and people have created virtual rooms, imagine what kind of trolling you could do with senses. Yeah, but scent systems are really, really, really at the early stages currently, but they've been also developed. And what about our brain? Can we hack our brain, get the system right there? We have these readers that can read our brain, but they are so poor currently that it takes a few months to get used to one and getting ready how to use it. So they are not really viable solution at the moment. They might be in the future. The biggest problem with that is that we get too much information from the brain. We can't cancel the noise that is coming from other parts of our body, because the brain is actually doing so subtle movements. And this is the biggest one, where we have the most research done, and it's currently working quite well, which is audio, which many of you might think at the first, but we've had virtual reality for blind people for quite a long time. We have really good binaural systems where you can have reflections from the walls and everything for the audio. And audio triggers are actually very, very important for the virtual reality. And for example, there's been cases where people have been using virtual reality goggles for treating different kind of post-traumatic stress disorders and stuff like that. And they've been found out that audio is way more important than visuals. And when we are currently creating pollen we are putting about 50% of our effort from the content side for the audio and 50% for the visuals. With older games, you might put like 20 or 30% of your effort for the realistic audio. But for virtual reality, you really need to think about audio a lot more and from new perspectives. There is this real space 3D audio, which is acquired partly by Oculus, which is free to use, I think, for Unity developers in the future, which is giving all of these kind of binaural reflections and everything like that for our ears. Okay, so what can we do with VR currently? What kind of applications we have? So what can you do with VR to get money? That's what all of you want, working on a really fun field, doing fun stuff. The oldest user of VR has been, of course, military. And there's been a lot of military training with virtual reality headsets already, and has been throughout the years. And there was the Norway army actually started using Oculus Rift DK1s as a tank controllers last year. So they implemented cameras outside the tank, so you can look out outside the tank through the goggles. And of course, there is the other side of the army that I briefly already talked about, was post-traumatic stress disorders and other stuff. So when you go to the battlefield, you have a VR training. When you get out of the battlefield, you get the VR treatment, so your mind won't blow up because of all the traumas you have. This is also from America. There is a really interesting documentary about how to use VR as a military treatment help for the veterans. You can Google it from the YouTube. Then you can use it as a practical tool for training. For example, surgeons. This might not be the best application for it, but there's been a lot of applications for the fields to do that. And then, of course, educational purposes. So you can get stuff that you can't really understand otherwise. For example, this is from demo called, I don't remember the name of it, but it has planets. So you can actually see the scale of the planets by yourself, which is something that it's really hard to explain to someone who is studying the scales of the planets. But when you fly into space and actually by yourself experience the scale of the planets, it's crazy. And it's really effective. You can remember it way easier. And then there is this other more active kind of teaching tools. So this is, for example, this kind of tool where you have the leap motion in your hand and a skeleton with organs and everything, and you can just pick it by piece and take it apart, examine every piece from all the angles, and then you can actually go inside blood cells and stuff and see what it looks like there. So, for example, inside heart. This is still under development and not public, but it's really cool demo. And then tourism. We can go to places where it's really hard to go, or we can go to places where kids just can't go without virtual reality. And this will be a bigger field that you might think, because currently in Japan there is a lot of virtual tourism studies done, because the age is populating so fast and the old people need to have something to do. So virtual reality is actually one of the better things for those two, because they can go to places, they can travel around, they can see and experience new things. But with tourism, it's something that is familiar enough for older folks that can't really use controllers or anything to experience that kind of thing through. And there's done a lot of 3D scanning also from the real environments. And one thing that I'm currently using a lot is virtual desktop. So when I'm using my computer, I'm not using a traditional monitor. I just slam an DK2 onto my head, and I have this infinite resolution monitor on my windows. And I have a largest TV of this room because of that. I can just scale it just the way I want. The resolution of the device is a bit troubling, but it's currently good enough that I can do game development with Oculus Rift on my head. I can do programming, I can do art, I can do all kind of social media stuff and Twittering at the same time. But what I really have found that is really useful when you are working on a virtual reality, that it's less distracting. Because it's really hard for us to focus on one thing nowadays. You have so many things all the time going around. But with this, you are actually inside your computer, so you don't have any outside distractions. So my roommate is just always, okay, Samuli, you are somewhere else, I don't care. And then, even within the desktop, because you can get everything so close and so big that you want to use them that way, you are usually using just one application at a time. And I'm way more productive in virtual reality than I'm with normal monitor, when I'm not struggling to find right keys from the keyboard. And then another big application, this is from Janus VR, which is currently internet of virtual reality. Everyone can make their own rooms, which are websites, and you can meet all the other people inside those rooms, and you can customize your character with happy smiley faces. And this is, I'm not sure that this Janus VR will be the big one. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be. But this might be one of the reasons why Facebook acquired Oculus. So we might be in this kind of new kind of internet at some point. It's usually called metaverse. And of course, games. That's what was the first ignition for the VR on the hacker side. Everyone wanted to do VR games. And now most of the content creators are actually making games. And I'm also making games. But it's interesting to think about all the other fields, because it's easier to get money from all the other fields. It's harder to get money from games. But it's much more fun to do games, so I try to make as much games as I can. These are just a few demos selected randomly from the most popular demos currently. And porn. It's always a driving force of new technology, and there is a lot of really interesting research done by porn and new kind of applications that are giving really, really different fetishes, the urges. I don't care, but it's going to be big, and there is already a few companies that you can subscribe to get VR porn, and I'm pretty sure they're making quite a lot of money. So it drove VHS, it drove DVD, now it's driving virtual reality. Unfortunately, through official channels where you can buy like Oculus games in the future, you can't upload porn into those. Just like in Steam, you can't upload porn in there. So it's a bit shady places to work around. Okay, let's go for designing for VR. As I said earlier, I have made quite a few games. I have made, I think, 6 VR games already, and I'm working on 2 currently. I will briefly just show screen caps of all of them, and then I'm going to give you a teaser from the game that we are working on the Mindfield Games, called Pollen. So this game here is a Puss Puss Platypus. You are a kissing platypus, and you control the game with your head and doing smooching sounds to the microphone. So I was using microphone as input. It's good. It was played by PewDiePie, so I was pretty proud of that. Then this is Water Hazard, which I was experimenting third-person cameras. So it's this kind of old-school survival horror like Silent Hill or Resident Evil with authentic graphics from PlayStation 1 era. So it works very well to have third-person controls from the Oculus Rift. This is this kind of first-person dungeon crawler, kind of like Dark Souls from first person. It's a bit hard to like do perfect movement from the first person, but it's pretty cool, and you can get really scary game done really, really easily. This wasn't a horror game, but when my friends were playing it, they were screaming half the time. And this is another experiment looks really crazy, and people said it hurts their heads and eyes, but I really like it. It was like an eye massage. But it was more of an experiment about stealth. So you are stalking people and moving slowly. So usually slower paced games from the first person perspective are better than games like Quake. Then I made this game called Magical Rift Heroine, which is like Guitar Hero with your head, and just jam with the beat of the song. This game was also played by PewDiePie, so it was very surprising that I have already gotten 2 gameplays out of him, and this is really known game currently. Like many people who have done a lot of VR stuff have heard about this game. And it was a first rhythm game done for virtual reality that I have ever encountered. So if someone knows earlier one, please tell me. But I think I was pioneering on that field. Then I made a one mobile game. This could be played with Google Cardboard or any other this kind of Google Cardboard-like device, which was this kind of Wipeout or F-Zero kind of game. And there I realized that you can't really use current generation of mobile devices to make VR games. So it just doesn't work. So luckily, the Gear VR is now going to work, which is going to launching soon. Then I joined Mindfield. I'm doing Pollen there currently, which is this kind of sci-fi first-person exploration game. If you have played games like Gone Home, you would like this game. And then currently I'm doing experimenting with leap motion, with the game that you cast shadows from your hand and try to match the shapes. There is a game jam that Leap Motion, the controller publisher, is currently doing, and you can get like $5,000 if you win that one, and you get free development kit for the Leap Motion. So if any of you like doing game jams, that's something you might want to consider because the prizes are quite good, and you can still get into the jam even though it started. It ends in 1st of December, I think. So I'll show you now a teaser from our game Pollen, which I've been working on a lot currently since I got into Minefield Games. I'm not sure if the audio is on. Nope. There was supposed to be audio on this device. Let's see. Oh, this is the power cable, I think.
Okay.
It's this one.
Okay.
I think. Is it on the? It's on the right. Check. Yeah.
Okay. Anything on the tech that we can do about this?
Yeah, we are going to watch it without. It's going to postpone. It's in YouTube, so you can watch it whenever you want. Great. So that was Pollen, and most of the stuff, that trailer, was done real time inside Unity. So it's not pre-rendered, except the B and the ending zooming part. So you can actually get a lot of good results from Unity if you know what you are doing and hack the engine. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the perspective of how to make games. As I said earlier, I have done first-person and third-person games. So first-person is the most obvious one, that if you want to have like most of presence in the game, that you really feel like you are there playing the game. The first-person, of course, is the best one for that, but it's also easiest way of getting the players sick, because simulation sickness is a really big problem with VR development still. So there are games that have done first-person well, where you have like right amount of detail in the places that it feels real, and all the interactions are okay. This is from Alien Isolation, which is currently, you can hack it to get work because it has non-official support for the Oculus Rift, which is one of the few AAA games that you can actually play with Oculus Rift. It's missing some options, and I wouldn't recommend it that much, but it's showing that what kind of experiences we could get in the future from the first-person games with AAA budgets, and the results are really promising. And also, there is a lot of attention that they have gained with the game, and many people have played it with Oculus Rift on and been really eager to get more experiences like that. I wouldn't recommend doing horror games though, because everyone is doing horror. Then there is third-person games. So this is Lucky's Tale, which is a third-person platformer. And with third-person games, it's usually important to have some kind of main character, one character, or a little army, like in RTS game, that you get this kind of unique bonding with that entity in that situation. And it's really comfortable usually to play the third-person games, because you don't have any sudden head movements and stuff like that. So I would recommend everyone to try out doing some kind of third-person games if they are thinking of what they are going to do with Oculus Rift. Because there is a lot less third-person games than third-person games than first-person games, but most of the third-person games I've played actually work extremely well. And you can also play with the scale quite a lot. So if you're having a third-person game, it's easier to make the world kind of like tiny or really large, and it still doesn't look like really odd. So it might be looking like you are playing with toys, for example. And then there is a mixed games, like this one, where you are actually looking yourself from the third perspective, even though you are looking from the eyes of the game character, which is kind of weird. And this game is also like controlled just with your head movements. So you can mix both of them too. So don't just limit yourself to first or third person. Yeah, this is about the should we stand in the game or should we sit in the game? So when you are designing a VR experience, that's one of the first things you are doing, like, is this game played standing up or is it just sitting down experience? Standing up can be way more immersive, and then it's usually better to be from the first person perspective. But it's a bit cumbersome to play games for long periods of time when you are standing. And Oculus has stated that Oculus Rift is seated experience, and they are not going to like say that you should make any standing games, but of course people are doing standing games. They are actually even themselves doing standing games, even though they are saying it's only for sitting. So the reason why sitting experiences are recommended, because it can get like really, really extreme. So this guy is here trying roller coaster, and it's not going really well. So you can imagine what would happen for this poor guy if he would be standing. And I hope that Oculus is okay, because it's getting smacked into the floor. Yeah, but most of the people won't get this get excited when they are trying it, but you never know. You need to be careful. And then, what kind of input device you would want to pick for the game when you are designing it. So we talked about these different kind of motion controls. Then, of course, traditional keyboard and mouse. It works quite okay, but most of the people have really, really poor understanding of keyboard layout, especially those who are not really working on IT. So you might want to keep it mouse only or just pressing spacebar. Also, the Oculus Rift has a camera, which is tracking your head position. And it works better if you are like further away from the computer. So it's hard to reach the keyboard and mouse if you can't bring them over or get the camera into some kind of wall mount position or something like that. Then, currently, the most popular input method is just traditional controller, and it works really well. We are using primarily Xbox controller for Poland, and we also have support for keyboard and mouse. Most of the people prefer to play the game on the controller, even if they would be hardcore first-person shooter players who want to play everything with keyboard and mouse, just because it's much more comfortable to use that kind of input method. Personally, I prefer keyboard and mouse, but there's always the question of preference. Then, do you want to use these kind of plunky controllers that most of the consumers won't have any kind of access? So you need to think about your why you are making this program, this application for the VR. And then, as I said earlier, I made a game with kissing sounds. You can use audio as an input. It's a really good input system. It's a bit hard to detect right noises, but when it's working quite well. And especially for little short demos where only thing you do is, for example, start a ride or start a movie or want to pause a movie, the audio controls would work really well with those. And don't forget that you can design the game solely just by using the head-mounted displays. They have rotational tracking, and then they have positional tracking. So you can rotate your head all around, and you can move your head all around. And there has been quite a few games that have been done just with using your head, and most of them work really well. They might get a little bit of tiring, so you shouldn't make like a headbanging game or something like that. It's not a good idea, maybe. But most of them work okay. There is one thing that you should avoid when you are making a game with just head tracking, is that you need to keep your head stationary, for example, in the fixed position and select something. It gets really tiring really fast. So you might want to do your selections, for example, with like head motions like this, and then nodding for selection, instead of just looking at selection arrow and looking at selection buttons. Okay, and then you can build your own input device. Why not? If you want to fly. People have done a lot of crazy stuff with Oculus. So this is a game where you are a bird. So you are in university, you have all of these equipment here, so just go crazy. You might not have an opportunity to go crazy when you are working. And then a little bit about art. When you are designing a game, what kind of environment we should do, what kind of art should we use? Should we go for this kind of epic open world, you can do everything is realistic? It's really hard to maintain the 75 FPS or 90 FPS with a game like this. And we still have the problem of having quite a low resolution, so you can't really see things that are really, really far away. So you shouldn't make games about sniping without scopes, for example. That's not a good idea. So it's been found out usually cartoony graphics works better. And they also avoid a factor of so-called uncanny valley, so something that feels that it's not like, it's trying to mimic our real world, but it's not doing it properly. But with cartoon worlds, as long as you have consistent rules of how that cartoon world is working, then just go for it, make your own world. And this is actually a Finnish game, which got through Indiegogo, and they got the funding to make this. So we are not the only VR developer in Finland currently, but there is not too many. And then design the audio. So just remember it. It's really, really important. You don't see it, you always forget it. But when you play the game, you feel like, oh, whoa, this is missing audio from that place. So let's take a really simple practical example from audio. In Poland, we have a gymnastic where you can play basketball. And you have a basketball. So you can bounce the basketball on the floor, but the sound it does is related to like how far it hits the ground. So just like the real basketball. And when you are walking on the gymnastic, you can hear the squeak, squeak, squeak from your foot that you can't hear in any other surface in the whole game. Just because those kind of little noises are what you hear when you are in the gym, usually. And without those sounds, the gym feels like it's not a gym. But you can't really pinpoint why. So it's really hard to pinpoint the audio problems, but you just need to do them really, really well, and then you don't have those problems. Of course, when you are making a cartoon world, you can be more liberal. But with Poland, we are making a realistic world, which is quite a challenge. Okay, so let's go to a few practical tips and tricks for VR development, which is a bit more serious thing, and this is maybe the most important part of this, so try to still keep wake up yourself. And these are technical, text-heavy important slides with no moving pictures or colors, just to emphasize the importance of this slide. So maintain the stable frame rate. So if there is something that is bringing down your frame rate, just cut it from the game. You can't have these kind of situations like you would in the old computer applications where it's just like, okay, it's just this one cave where we have this drop of 10 FPS. You just need to redesign the cave or just cut the cave. I don't care. You need to keep the stable frame rate. Do not freeze the image. So Half-Life 2 has an official VR support, and whenever it's loading a new scene, it just slams a loading text and freezes the whole world. So if you're turning your head, the fixed image is turning with you. So your head is expecting to be turning in a three-dimensional world, but it's not actually rotating the head, it's rotating the whole environment, and it gets really nauseous quickly. So I have seen people who play the game are like, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. Loading, ugh! Like, don't freeze the image. Always have the head tracking. Which comes to the next points, never force the head movement. So you wouldn't want someone to grab your head and like move it around. So I hacked a VR support to Mirror's Edge, just to see how does it feel like. And the biggest problem with that game was that every thing like you grab the pipe or turn a valve or something, there is a lot of forced head moving, of course, because it's a traditional monitor game. You should drop it. But you can have it as a really subtle head movements. So at the Oculus has their like this kind of guidance of like what you should do when you're making a VR game, and they are saying that never force any movement. But I've seen many demos, and I've done it for my own demos too. If you make natural small head movements that people don't actually even notice, it makes you even more grounded into virtual reality. You just need to keep them really subtle. And this is also another thing, no unpredictable events. So don't force the head movement fastly. So don't turn a happy game into a horror game, for example. You can have scary things, but if you are not like giving players a warning about something that is going to happen instantly, it will get like really nauseous, and someone will get heart attacks at some point. I don't want that. It's not good for PR, for the VR. And other thing is that they are really annoying. So if you are expecting something to work some another way, you get annoyed. And with virtual reality, many people get annoyed, for example, for some reason faster than like in any other places, because they just think it's reality, it should work. So if you slam your head inside the wall, and then you can see through the wall. That might be a problem. Then have a button to reset tracking. So the Oculus Rift has the camera and then the sensors on the head. And whenever you start the game, it resets this as the origin of the world. But then you have this chair with wheels, and you just swing around the place and are playing like here. And this is now your forward direction. But previously, your forward direction was here. So you need to have a way to reset it back where you are currently standing. And this is something that many developers just forget. And it's really annoying because it makes many games unplayable after like 5 minutes because you have moved around a little bit. Some games actually have tried to do this in a way that they gradually actually reset the position, which might work in some cases, but only when you are just moving a little bit. So for example, changing your position on the chair. Then every user has their own profile when they are using Oculus Rift. And they have this interpupillary distance, which is the distance of your eyes. And every guy has a different kind of distance between their eyes. So if you put a headset that is calibrated to someone else, it might look wrong. So usually, if there is a public demonstration of Oculus, they have this kind of average IPD, which is working for most of the people, but it's not going to be perfect for anyone. So I highly encourage everyone here who is part of the university, if you want to try out Oculus Rift, just borrow one from your university or buy one, of course. But they have quite long queues already. It takes like 2 months if you order it now. But this is really, really important also. Then recommendations. These are not set in the stone, but would be nice to have in the game. So using the official SDK and drivers, this helps quite a lot. You can hack your own, especially on the Linux side, but I would still highly recommend using the official SDK and drivers because they've been done by people who have a lot of experience. Then there is this health and safety warning, which pops in front of the game every time you launch it. Luckily, there was a new SDK update last Saturday, I think, and now we can finally disable it. But still, for the consumers, you should have it. And it's just there to protect your legal rights in the United States of America, because you just need to have a health and safety warning that this is a head-mounted display. Don't put it in the heads of small children, and we are not responsible if you slam your head into some wall. I haven't actually never read it. I just always skip it, so I'm not really sure what it's including. Then have some time to settle down for the VR. So if you have like a roller coaster, don't just start it when you put it on. Have a button to start it so you can just get used to the situation, what's going to happen. So usually it's good to have some kind of menu scene at the beginning of the game. It's also very important, highly recommended, that you keep the Oculus Rift experience throughout the whole game. So starting from the menus to the gameplay, to the credits, to quitting. So you don't need to switch between normal monitor for the menus, and then when the game starts, just put the Oculus on. It's really annoying. And it's not that hard to do menus on VR. Then handle the head clipping. As I said, if you put your head inside the wall, something would be good to happen. With pollen, we fade to black, so you can't see inside the wall. So if your head is inside the wall, you just can't see anything. Some games do the fading, and then they give a message, like your head is in the wrong place, it's not belonging here, put it somewhere else. And some games have also tried that if you try to push your head on the wall, just push your body back. And that might sound a good thing to do, like it's really logical if you try to do that in the real life. You just can't force your head inside the wall. But that can get nauseous for some people. So I would recommend just fading to black. And this is not as a big problem that many people might think, because subconsciously, we avoid putting our head inside the walls. We have a lot of practical experience from that when we were a child. Yes. Then it's good to have some kind of front direction indicator. So, for example, in the pollen, we are inside this space suit because you are in space. So you have a helmet around you. So if you are looking here, you can see the part of your shoulder and helmet, and here part of the shoulder and helmet. So you always know, okay, this is where am I facing. Because many games have different body movement from the head movement. I think there's going to be something about that in more detail in soon. And then respect personal space. So if you're doing user interface elements and stuff, don't put them too close to your eyes. So it might get really distracting and it's really hard to focus on it. And if you are making a game where there's like NPCs, usually they come really close in the games. So you might not want to come that close in the real life, especially with Finns, we have bigger personal space. I don't care for the sex applications, they can come as close as they want. And this was I was talking about, decouple head and body. So many games decouple your head movements and body movements, so you can look in a different direction when you are walking, which usually in the games you can't do without strafing. And strafing doesn't really feel that good, so I would highly recommend doing it. But some people like walking only in the direction when they are looking at. It's a bit like more cumbersome to move around, but it's better for those who are trying it for the first times. It's more obvious to do it that way, and then they just need one button, walk, and they are walking where they are looking. So you should consider really like, well, if you're doing first-person game, which one to use, or if you want to give option for players to choose by themselves. And I would highly recommend doing that if you can. And then test often. And don't just test on the traditional monitor. On the Pollen, we all have our own development kits, usually, and we just put them on and test the game. And it's especially important that artists actually test their models. Because if you model in the 3D program, like a chair and a table, and you put them in the game, you might see like, oh, this table is like 8 centimeters too tall. It's 8 centimeters. Like, it shouldn't matter for a normal video game, but in VR, it might feel really, really off. So if you are playing these games that are not actually made for VR originally, for example, the Alien Isolation, all the humans are like hobbits. They are like 1 meter, and the doors are quite small, so it feels a little bit off. So art side is really important to test often, and of course, you want to test it that everything works on the VR side. And especially now that the SDK is still heavily in development, it's updating all the time. So last Saturday, all the commands on the SDK changed, and all the prefabs in the Unity changed, and everything that had anything to do with virtual reality broke in Pollen. So I'm actually currently fixing all of those. So you need to test often, and you should always use the most up-to-date drivers. And options, yeah, I said about that. So with Unity, Unity has its own integration package that you can download, and it's currently working with even Unity free. So if you don't have it on home, the Pro license, you can just use the free version. And then there is 2 modes of using. This is all for Unity now, because Unity is currently the most used platform for VR games. I think it's 90% of games are currently using Unity. So the extend mode is something where you just put the Oculus Rift as a second monitor or third monitor. And you can just drag the game onto that monitor. But it's a bit cumbersome to always drag this game from window to window and screen to screen and try to get everything working perfectly. So Oculus have made this direct Rift mode, where Oculus connects into the computer as an Oculus Rift device, which is not a screen. And whenever you launch an Oculus Rift game, it only shows up there. So it's really convenient, but unfortunately, it's still heavily under development, so it doesn't work as well as extend mode most of the time. But when you are releasing a game, you should make sure it works on the both modes, because most of the people want to play it on direct mode. Then there is some settings that you need to take care of. Wherever you put in Unity the camera, it will follow orientation of that thing. So if you have a human body, just put the camera in the head. It's like in the right place. It's quite simple, but you should always be take care of that. And then there is also settings to get from the player's profile. You can get the height of the player and the gender of the player. So if you want to have a female and male model, consider doing that. And if you want to have like people playing with their own height, you can have that as well. Then there was this time warp, which is that magical technique that you should Google if you are doing something. It's integrated into Unity, and you don't need to do anything else but check it's on, and it works. But it might still cause some problems, so it's good to know what it actually is. So you can see whenever it's causing any problems that it's actually time warp causing the problems. Then you have this mirror mode, which is for the direct Rift mode. So whenever you are playing it in the Rift, of course no one else can see the game. So if you enable mirror mode, it will get mirrored on the another screens, so you can actually see from the computer that what someone else is doing on the Rift. And then you can set the render scale that I was earlier talking about, that how big the scaling is of the rendered image. So do you want to scale it a little bit down and get more performance, or scale it up and make it better looking? And then for Troubleshoot, so the Oculus Rift is mostly used for DirectX 11 currently on Windows, so you should always have that enabled on the project. If you can't enable that, it might or might not work with DirectX 9. And then there is this additional command line for Unity that you can actually use to force it to launch on DX11 mode, which you might need to use sometimes. Then, if you have any funky problems with the game, it's usually post-processing shaders that are for full screen. So for example, we have one explosion in Pollen, and whenever that explosion happens, the Y coordinates of rendering flip, and the scene is upside down. And that's not really fun. Most of the time, it just doesn't work, so you can just see black. So always check your shaders and just disable them and enable them one by one to find out where the problem is. It might not give an error. And then it's really cumbersome to try the games on editor with Oculus Rift, so just build them and play the builded ones, and then get all the profilers and stuff attached to the builded one, so you can get all the error logs. They might have better editor support later, but currently it's pretty poor. And the game functions differently from editor to build, even with Oculus. So if you enable Oculus and you are in editor, you might see a different thing in build, which is really annoying. So that's enough talk from my end. So if you have any reason to open your mouth, do it now. I'm still here.
So we have the mic here. Please put your hand up. Come on.
So everything was covered. You are ready to go. Make your own VR experiences.
How many here have been working on the Oculus? Could you just put your hands up? Not too many. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very quick and improv question, but when you mentioned the problems with the shaders and especially the post-processing effects, have you actually in testing noticed something that seems to be particularly non-fitting as a visual effect, or from the image effects in Unity essentially, something that just doesn't work when we're dealing with VR? Maybe from a user experience perspective, maybe from a tech art perspective?
From the technical perspective, everything should work, or you can make them to work. There shouldn't be any limits. But there is some stuff like motion blur, of course. You want to minimize it. We have this good hardware to minimize motion blur, so just don't put it there. And then all kind of depth of field effects, because with Oculus you don't know where the player is actually looking at. So if you have any kind of depth of field effects, it looks quite funny. So I wouldn't put those in there. And then there is some talk about how to do anti-aliasing. So you might want to do anti-aliasing just by scaling up the image render target and then scaling it down instead of doing these all kind of fancy anti-aliasing things.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I could ask something about the business side. So now, for example, I don't know if this is something you can't talk about, but it just would be interesting to hear how you've been like able to get publishers or stuff like that interested now that the situation is still a bit on the edge. Like how will this thing break through? So
I think I can say that Tekes said that it's really refreshing that someone is not working on mobile. And the feedback we have got from the players and from the people on the industry, everyone is really excited about VR. So I think within like 2 years, it's going to boom quite a bit. And it's good to be doing it now because you are expert at that point. Like I started doing Oculus Rift stuff when I got my hands on DK1, which was shortly after the Kickstarter. And because of that, I have already gotten 2 jobs, which was the F-Secure job, and now I'm working on Mindfield Games. And I also have gotten another job offer that I can't talk about, but it was also for the VR. And then there is very many architectural companies that would want VR specialists right now. My girlfriend's father is architect, so I know a few things about that side too. So it's good to start it now and experience it now if you want to work on VR. And it's really like going to be big.
If you develop a game for Oculus Rift, do you need any other prerequisites besides Oculus?
Oculus Rift. You just need Oculus Rift. That's
nothing
everything
else.
you need. They have the SDK, it's free.
Yeah, and you can manage with everything you need in developing a regular game.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there is not like, it's mostly design changes that I was talking about. Technical side is not that hard.
You have tested lots of the recent games. Can you tell us what kind of trends are, what kind of games the people are making, and what works, what doesn't?
It's quite a broad question, but it's currently everyone is testing everything. As I said, it's mostly first person, so third person games are minority, and I would like to see more of those. And now current trends, I think horror games have been a big trend for VR, and everyone is doing a lot of horror games. And that's also like on the indie side too. It's quite easy to make a horror game with quick scares, so it's quite easy. But there is no big trends. It's because everyone is currently doing so random things, and that's why it's really exciting. Like every time I just load up the new demos that I can find for Oculus Rift, I can't never know what I'm expecting, except that it's usually very poor because most of the developers don't know what they are doing. But that's always with free technology. Something about numbers, like there is 200,000 Oculus Rift devices for the developers already given, which makes it the biggest development kit in the world on the games industry. That has never been. So interest is really, really high.
any last questions?
Yeah. If you are shy, you can just poke me after the talk too.
Yeah, maybe we can move to the end, but thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
That was lots of interesting stuff coming up. Excited to see what you guys come up with now with the final game. When is it coming out actually?
When the Oculus Rift is coming out, the
Okay.
consumer model.
Cool. So again, as normal, we're gonna have some refreshments in the cafe side here at Design Factory. So please come around and still hang out and talk about the subject with some old friends or new people if you have time. And we will continue again with the next lecture in about a month. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Noni.
No niin, kiitos.
Se oli tyhjentävä paketti. Siinä tuli paljon asiaa.
Joo.
Mielenkiintoista
Joo,
matskua.
itse asiassa me juteltiin ton niin Ollin kanssa tästä aikaisemminkin, niin siis joka piti tulla alun perin tänne meidän toi tuottaja.
Joo.
Ja sanoi sit mulle, että tuu minä, koska mä tällä hetkellä tiedän varmaan näistä enemmän kukaan muu Suomessa.
Joo, siis
koska mä oon tehnyt näitä niin
siltä,
paljon.
että sä oot hyvin pitkällisesti
Joo. Ehkä
tutkinut
saattoi olla,
näitä.
että saatoin tähän
Nimilista joo, mä voin kohta tulla tuomaan sen.
Joo.
Onko sulla aikaa tulla hetkeksi tuohon
Joo,
hengaan?
siis ei mulla ole mitään. Mä oon menossa syyskramiin tänä iltana.
Okei, se on nyt meneillään.
Siis se alkaa
siis-
vasta joskus 6 jälkeen. Niin
Joo,
mitään
jos
kiire.
haluat tässä hetken olla, niin se on tässä tosiaan